I have a unique technology that measures how people think and how they make decisions. And it's very different. It's not a personality profile or a behavioral profile, which most people are used to. It actually measures, rather than behavior and personality, how people actually think. And it's an objective science. Most of those tools that are out there, great tools, and I use them for different purposes. But most of them are subjective in nature, so the accuracy is, while typically, if they're validated, they're very accurate. You can only use them for certain things in certain instances. Anyway, the technology that I utilize primarily for helping business owners make sure they're hiring exactly the right person, and specifically, most importantly, making sure that they're not hiring someone who's really a bad fit for the company, because that's bad for everyone, right? Is a technology that's objective in its science, mathematical. And so I use that technology to predict performance and help business owners know who the best person is. A lot of business owners will use this technology and my ability to interpret it to understand their current staff and how to get the most out of them, and how to, say, motivate people, if you will, or just make sure that people are performing to the highest degree possible. I've always been really interested in people. I love people, and I love the idea of performance, and how and I love the idea, how do people learn and how do they translate that learning into actual performance. And I studied sports psychology for a little over 20 years because I'm fascinated, again, with how people get the best out of themselves, especially under pressure when it means the most and is most important. In, let's see, April of 91, I went to work for a guy named Stephen R. Covey. Stephen Covey wrote the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he's written, of course, 2 other very famous, well-known books, First Things First and Principle-Centered Leadership. And I spent 5 years running the Central United States for Stephen. When I left that company, I went to another organization where we taught leaders and managers of Fortune 500 companies how to coach other people to higher performance using a sports psychology methodology. So I was pretty stoked when I learned about this methodology and about this company. In fact, the owner of that business just put out a best-selling book this past October 2010, and his name is Alan Fine, and the book is called You Already Know How to Be Great. I recommend it to you. It's a fabulous book. But when I left Covey, I went to work for that organization, Alan Fine's company, called Inside Out. And they actually had me complete this exercise that your staff member did. And I was absolutely shocked by what they knew about me. I didn't think it was possible to know that kind of thing about me. And so I really was hooked from the word go when I found that technology. And in fact, I was fortunate that 3 months later, the worldwide guru of the science, the man who has spent 35 years refining the math, advancing the technology, computerizing everything, writing hundreds of thousands of paragraphs and different sentences so that it's custom to the report and the results are custom to each person. He came out and he trained us for 3 days. That was about 15 years ago. And so that's how I ran into it. Once I learned about that technology and then I met him and got trained in it, I was hooked. And I didn't really do much about it 15 years ago, although I've been using it ever since then. I didn't actually formalize it into a business because it was still left wanting a little bit in terms of marketing. The technology was amazing, great results, but from a mass marketing standpoint, it wasn't quite ready, so I didn't do much with it until about 4 or 5 years ago. Well, I started my own business about 11 years ago, coaching business owners, doing consulting, management development, people performance. But I started to, in 2008, when the economy took a bit of a downfall, right? I I lost about 40% of my business, maybe 35% of my clientele, just because Cisco Corporation is a big client of mine today, and they've been a big client of mine, but I do a lot of work for them. But in 2008, when the economy hit, they just said they cut out all consultants, and they were a big part of my business. So I fortunately they weren't all my business, but I had to sit back and ask myself, where am I unique, and what can I do differently that where I can make a difference? And I instantly thought about this technology and how unique it is in its ability to, in its accuracy and what it measures and the way it measures it, and then the fact that it is objective and therefore so much more accurate. You can count on it. It's trustworthy. And I said, well, I mean, not too many people know about this technology, and not too many people have the skill that I have. And fortunately, about 2 years earlier, I had actually gotten master certified and master trained by that worldwide guru I had met 15 years earlier. So I hung out a shingle and started letting business owners know that I had this ability to predict performance in a unique, accurate way that they could count on. And that's when I started using this technology specifically in this way. I think the way that I overcame that was really quite a fortuitous, actually, experience, because I met a gentleman who, I picked a niche. What I did is I decided, well, maybe I should really get started. Now, I had heard a lot about niche marketing, right? So I decided on a niche. I thought to myself, what industries are growing despite the fact that the economy is so bad? Because they'll have money, they're not afraid to spend, and we'll have a greater need, right? So, really the only industry that was growing, I think, was healthcare. They grew 27% in 2008, and everybody else kind of lost business. But I did find a unique niche in working with law firms. I had a friend who owned a personal injury law firm, and I asked him how's business, and he's a good man, but he kind of chuckled and laughed and said, in a down economy, we really grow like crazy because everybody wants to sue each other. And I kind of didn't really love that, but I thought, hey, everybody has a need, and so I started focusing on law firms, and I had a neighbor that started to focus on law firms. He owns a business. He started focusing on law firms at the same time. Long story short, we went to a conference for attorneys, a marketing conference for attorneys. I met some key people who own the herd, as we know the language, right? They basically had a whole lot of attorneys who followed them and listened to what they had to say. And basically they loved what I did. They found out about what I did. They loved it and started to share it with their own niche group of attorneys. And then actually one of those persons, Rem Jackson, who owns a company called toppractices.com, he is a coach to podiatrists. And he really took a liking to what I do, and he got that in front of all his podiatry clients. And so that's the way I overcame it. It was really fortuitous, but I think the good decision was to focus on a niche and to go be somewhere and do something, even though the money was short. My father is an entrepreneur, my mother and father. They are both very, very entrepreneurial people. They were raised in eastern North Carolina, and my father decided it'd be fun to be a disc jockey, and he had a really bad Southern accent. He calls it a bad Southern accent, a real strong Southern drawl, And so when he was 15 years old, he read out loud for 3 hours a day. He says 3 hours a day. Probably, I believe he did it, but I don't know how much time he spent at it. But he read out loud, he read the newspaper out loud into the mirror every day, trying to overcome his accent, because he learned that the big money was like in New York and so forth, and in these big markets. And when he was 17, he went on the air live as a disc jockey. And then, I don't know, so many years later, he was driving up to New York, he and my mother, to see my mother's brother, and he decided to take a left and go to Detroit, where he had sent an audio tape of himself to a general manager of a radio station. My dad drove all night from midnight till 9 a.m. to go see this. So long story short, my dad got this job in Detroit as a disc jockey, and then he became a voiceover talent, and then he started his own marketing company, and kind of everything he ever did turned to gold. So he was a huge influence on me and my mother, and their work ethic and their focus and their belief in themselves, and the aggressive nature that, frankly, I don't know, I like people, and I wasn't born necessarily with a real killer instinct, I wouldn't say. I shouldn't maybe admit that, but it took me a lot of years to learn to be very practical and to focus on getting results on a day-to-day basis, which I love the saying my dad said. He said, owning a business is like riding a tiger. If you get off, it'll eat you alive. So, it took me years to learn to be anyway, so they were big influences, big mentors, and I owe them a great deal. It's been really interesting to find. I do have some things to say about that, but it has been interesting to find that it is kind of across the board. I've seen very successful, I've seen profiles where I'd say, oh yeah, this person would be very successful, but it doesn't measure everything in a person, right? And it can't know what they believe. It can't know what they think. It knows how they think and how they make decisions, how they're wired to do that. And that is the foundation of performance, frankly, because how you see the world affects how you analyze what you perceive. It affects what you allow yourself to see and not see. And then it affects how you analyze it and the decision you make as a result, which affects the action you'll take, which then affects the results you get. And so if you want to change your results, you can reverse engineer that process. So I've seen a lot of different profiles, thousands and thousands, of course, and a lot of entrepreneurs. And one thing I've seen that I do know is that about 90% of people are over-focused on where they're headed. Yeah, they're driven by something, but they're driven by their beliefs. And now, again, I can't know what their beliefs are, but they're driven inside by a need to go and achieve something. The human mind is always seeking meaning. It's always seeking meaning. So maybe if you have people that aren't performing the way you'd like them to perform, maybe they're not experiencing the meaning that they need to have in your business, right? Speaking to everyone, Travis. But that's one piece that stands out to me. Of course, there are different patterns that make it easier for people to be entrepreneurial, because some people are so focused on mitigating risk that they have fear. They always want to know that, well, if I take this action, am I definitely going to get this result? And that's hard to know. And they slow themselves down and hesitate more, and they prefer the consistency of a job, right? Where other people basically, they have the wiring where they're maybe extremely practical, very focused on concrete organizing, concrete things that are happening immediately around them right now. And they're very results focused, and they don't pay attention to systems. But it doesn't mean they're going to be successful, comparatively speaking. There is an ideal entrepreneurial view of the world. But again, because people are so driven inside themselves, many people succeed. So I've seen people who you'd go, man, they don't focus on anything, they don't think about anything, everything they see is broken and flawed and won't work, and how could they ever succeed? But I've seen people like that making $3-4 million a year, businesses they started on their own, very successful, highly educated. You can't say this person is definitely going to be a successful entrepreneur, because no matter how you think, there are things you can do and strategies you can implement in order to do your wiring better, if that makes that makes any sense. Be more effective. Sure. RealTalentHiring.com is my website. Yeah, so you can go to RealTalentHiring.com and take a look. You can register to experience the process and the methodology for free if you are a business owner and if you plan to hire soon. And the way that works is you would kind of like what you did, Travis. You know, you'd have someone that you know very well, but who I do not know, complete this quick exercise. There's no questions. It takes less than 20 minutes, and it's actually a thinking exercise. So the results that you get, they're actually performing a task. And so the results that you get back are how they performed. And because it measures how they're wired, it's how they will always perform. And anyway, so I look forward to meeting anyone who'd like to do it. And Travis, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.